Samsung Galaxy A21s. This has far and away been the most talked about phone from you guys. Everyone wanted to know when this phone would come out and when I'd feature it on the channel, and I'm super excited to finally get my hands on it. Now, if you're even vaguely familiar with Samsung's A series lineup, you might be asking yourself what the heck happened with the regular A21, since the S series of these phones is usually an upgrade or update 6 months or so after the standard version. And to be completely honest, I have no idea. I don't know why this phone came out first, but I do know the regular A21 isn't hitting US carriers for another couple of weeks at least. But if you don't want to wait for that, or if you're outside the US and maybe live in a country or region that isn't getting the regular A21 at all, this A21s is probably for you, and it's now widely available from pretty much everywhere. It's listed for sale on places like Amazon unlocked right now for under $220, which I think is a really good price for this phone, but I anticipate the price will continue to come down in the coming months. And if you guys are interested in doing some comparison shopping of your own, or maybe want to buy this phone for yourself, I'll have some links down below in the video description to where you can get this phone at its cheapest current prices. So check down there so you don't miss out on any good deals. Alright, enough talking, let's go ahead and unbox this phone and see what the new A21s is all about. First things first, sliding off the sleeve of the box, we're greeted by the usual Samsung logo printed on a little packet of stuff. And inside here is just some paperwork and a quick start guide. Unlike some other A series phones, this A21s does not ship with any included case for the phone. Next up, we have the phone itself. I got mine in this blue color, but it's also available in white, red, and black. We'll set it aside for just a second, and digging a little deeper in the box here, there are also a couple of other things worth noting. First off, at the very bottom of the box is where you'll find the SIM ejector tool, so don't forget about that if you need it. Also included is a pair of Samsung's wired earbuds, the older all plastic style that we've seen before. And finally, we of course also get a USB-A to USB-C cable for charging, and Samsung's own 15-watt fast charger wall plug. With all that junk out of the way, here is the A21s itself. And right off the bat, I have to say, this blue color looks super nice. And I think people familiar with the A20, A20s, and A20e from last year will notice a decent redesign with this new A21s. The new A21s is a fairly large 6.5-inch device. It's the same screen size as the A51, for example, but with a little chunkier of a body, so it certainly feels more bulky in the hand. One-handed use is still possible, though certainly not something that would work for everyone, but I will say that getting a phone this size at this price point is a pretty good value for those of you who really like big phones and big screens. With the A21s, you can see we get an off-center Infinity O hole punch cutout for the front camera off towards the top left corner there, which is a pretty interesting choice. It mimics what we actually saw on the A11, and all the way around really, this phone has fairly minimal bezels, with just a slightly larger bottom chin, though it's far less prominent than some other phones we've seen. And while this phone doesn't offer the complete redesign like the more expensive A51 and A71 phones, I do think Samsung still did a nice job giving the A21s a fresh, modern look. Like every A-series phone, this device is also constructed from an all-plastic housing. The shiny, polished rear material is made to mimic glass, and with a nice rainbow effect, I think it does look fairly premium. It's a design choice we're all very familiar with now at this point, and I think it's one of the things Samsung does well on their A-series phones. They basically offer a good-looking device with budget materials that don't make the phone look or feel too cheap at all, even though you are saving quite a bit of money. Taking a look around at everything else, on the left side of this phone you have your SIM and SD card tray. On the right there's the volume and power buttons. Down below is where you'll find the headphone jack, USB-C charging port, and the single downward speaker. And across the back there are a couple of things worth noting. First off, the A21s does pack the quad camera setup, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But below that you'll also see the fingerprint reader. Samsung opted to just keep the dedicated physical rear-mounted solid setup here, and I think this was the right choice. I personally do prefer the physical fingerprint sensor. In-display readers are a bit too slow and inaccurate for me, and this is placed just right. It works well, and it's plenty fast. In addition to that, this phone also supports Face Unlock, which you can pair up as well, and Face Unlock on the A21s still feels very fast too, so two great unlocking methods that you can utilize with this phone. The 6.5-inch display on the A21s is a 1600 by 720 PLS TFT display, which is Samsung's own version of LCD, and it packs in around 270 pixels per inch. The taller 20 by 9 aspect ratio gives you plenty of room to view all of your content, and even though you've got a bigger LCD display with a lower pixel density, I think the viewing experience here is still pretty decent. Holding the phone off axis, you're obviously going to mess up the view a bit, but from a regular angle and normal distance, the A21s offers a bright, colorful display that shows your content really well. While I consistently praise the 1080p AMOLED screens of the A31 and above, this lower quality display on the A21s is still pretty solid, and I think for a vast majority of people, it's totally fine. What you're really getting here more than anything is just sheer size. This is a big phone with a big screen, but you don't have to pay a ton of money to get that. If screen quality is more important to you, that is the color, the resolution, the detail, stuff like that, you should maybe consider opting for something like the A31 instead. But for a vast majority of people, what you end up getting here with the A21s really is pretty good, all things considered. Inside, the A21s packs a really interesting array of specs, and the first thing I think a lot of people will like is the battery capacity. This phone is powered by a 5000 milliamp capacity battery, which is above average in my opinion, and particularly good sized for a phone at this price point. Also, just paired with the lower end screen and reasonable internal specs, I think this size of a battery will allow this phone to chug through more than a day's use and beyond really easily. I'm interested to put it to the test in the coming days, but I suspect this A21s may just have the best battery life across the entire A series lineup. Paired with that 15-watt fast charger, there seems to be a lot of potential here. Powering the A21s is Samsung's own new Exynos 850 chipset, coupled with the Mali G52 GPU, and a choice of either 32GB of internal storage paired with 3GB of RAM, 64GB of storage and 4GB of RAM, or 64GB of storage and 6GB of RAM, all just depending on how much money you want to spend and obviously which configuration is available in your region. The phone I have here is the model with 64GB of storage and 4GB of RAM, and I suspect that's what a vast majority of people will likely end up getting. Here are the Geekbench 5 and Antutu benchmark scores, so you can get an idea of the performance potential and maybe compare it with some other devices you're familiar with. But in practice, out of the box, this phone feels pretty quick. It does ship with Android 10 and One UI 2 out of the box, which is what we're all pretty familiar with at this point. And the A21s, I think, offers enough power and performance potential to cut through just about anything you might ask it to do. Keep in mind, this is still a budget device, right around $220, so you have to keep those expectations in check. I think 4GB of RAM is absolutely the bare minimum really any smartphone should have nowadays, so we've got that here with this phone, and the Exynos 850 is the newest entry-level chipset from Samsung, so you're at least getting the most up-to-date internals in this performance range. Obviously though, it'll be interesting to see how this new chipset lasts in the long term. It obviously needs to be efficient and it needs to perform well under stress, and I look forward to putting that to the test in future videos, but at least right now, out of the box, things feel pretty good so far. So finally, let's talk cameras, and this is really another area where we see a pretty significant upgrade. The A21s offers a quad camera setup around back that includes a 48 megapixel f2.0 main lens, an 8 megapixel ultra wide lens, 2 megapixel macro lens, and 2 megapixel depth sensor. All in all, I think hardware wise, you have plenty of stuff to work with here, and on the software side of things, you can't expect too much, but all the basics are at least there. 1080p video recording, panorama, HDR, some pro controls. There's no night mode and no video stabilization at all from what I can tell, but I wasn't really expecting either of those things, honestly. I think at the end of the day though, this is still a solid setup with some potential. megapixel. Up front, the selfie camera is actually just a 13 megapixel f2.2 lens, but with a couple sample shots here, things don't look too bad. Skin tones are a bit soft with Samsung's usual sort of beauty mode effect that they tend to have, but the color looks good and there's enough detail, all things considered. With a live focus shot, yeah, it definitely misses the mark with edge detection, but again, you sort of have to keep your expectations realistic. I think compared to a lot of other Samsung's previous A series phones, the selfie camera is still a huge improvement. So while the release schedule here is pretty strange, I actually do think this new A21s will probably be one of the most popular phones of the year and will likely outsell the regular A21, both in the US and around the world. For the money, this is likely the best value A series phone when it comes to design, screen size, specs, and features. And I'm really excited to compare this to the rest of the A series devices. But for now, I hope you guys did enjoy this quick unboxing and first look. Let me know what you think of this phone. Is the A21s something you're even considering, or maybe you'd rather just go with something different? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.